people, after somewhat of a... it hasn't been that long of a hiatus, but it's been a couple days since we should have posted this. It's the Demons from Outer Space. Dylan McCandless, Super DM64. He's here. If he wasn't, well, I probably wouldn't be here either, so thanks, Dylan. Thanks for that.
No, yeah. It wouldn't be the Demons from Outer Space. It would just be a video.
Or I would just be like, I don't want to fucking post this. It's me rambling about bullshit for 2 hours, and then I would delete it and never post it. That's how it would go. Anyway, so the shit that we're going to ramble about that I will post, though, as we announced at the end of last week, will be the 1978. I'm pretty sure that's the year. I'm going to double check in a second. But the pilot for the old school Hulk TV series. Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno. You all know the one I'm talking about. Dylan, you certainly know the one I'm talking about, correct? You watched the pilot, yes? We watched it together. I know. I was there.
Yes. I'm quite aware of this show. I've always been aware of this show. Just haven't seen a whole lot of it. But I had seen the pilot before. This was my second time viewing the pilot. So yeah.
When was the first time, roughly?
It's been a few years.
Okay. So here's the thing. So this show is a little weird to talk about now because we live in a day and age where the Hulk is a very, very well-known cinematic property. Partially because of this show, interestingly, in terms of, like, people, I think a generation or maybe 4 or 5 generations above us who were introduced to the Hulk and the Marvel Universe through this show. Now, I happened to be one of those people in our generation who had that same experience. Although this wasn't like my first Marvel thing. I had seen the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie before I saw this, but this was the first one that I was like, wow, I want to see and read everything with this guy in it. That's how I sounded when I was a kid. I was very annoying. My parents are saints for putting up with me. But the Hulk really captured my imagination. This show in particular being the version that made me the long-term, die-hard, consistent fan that I am. And the thing is, you know, I got into the comics and everything around the same time. But, you know, I grew up in a period where the movie was coming out, the Ang Lee Hulk movie. Like, I remember looking up stuff on the internet while that was, you know, being released. And then I eventually saw it, and I showed it to my mom, and she was like, oh, he's called Bruce Banner, and his father is called David? And I'm like, yeah, it's the Bruce Banner is his name in the comics, and David Banner is his name in the TV show, so that's like a reference to the TV show. And she was just like, oh, I had no idea that his name was supposed to be Bruce. And I was just like, really? Because I was a kid. I had no idea that wasn't like a commonly known thing. I thought that was like a well-known Clark Kent and Superman relationship, Bruce Banner and the Hulk. And when I
no, I mean, a lot of people in the generations preceding us don't know shit about Marvel Comics unless they actually read them.
Well, this show wouldn't have given them any idea of it. Is the thing.
As opposed to DC, in which everybody knows Batman and everybody knows Superman. And I think that's just a function of the fact that Batman and Superman are about 30 years older than all these Marvel superheroes.
Yeah, well, the DC superheroes were well-established things when they got their main shot at the silver screen.
They've had longer to sink into the public consciousness. We're only now reaching the era where Marvel is well-known pretty much by everybody. I had a similar experience. My dad fucking watched this show back in the day. He I don't even know if he knew that the Hulk was a comic book character. And then I remember when the Hulk Lee movie came out, the Ang Lee movie came out.
Oh my
I remember
God.
when the Ang Lee movie came out, he was complaining that the Hulk was too big and then he didn't look like he did in the show. And I was like, no, but that's how he looks in the. You know that the show's not the original, right? And I don't think he had any idea.
Well, again, if you watch the show, the pilot maybe in particular, although any other episode of the show wouldn't give you any more of an idea that this is based on a comic book. I think the closest you would ever watch anything and go, oh, this is like supposed to be a comic book superhero thing is when you watch like the crossover shit they did way later, like the Thor special and the Daredevil special. But those aired after the show was done. So watching the actual show, it's like a straight up sort of problem of the week, fugitive on the run with a monster in it show. That's the idea. And the monster, because it's based on a character from a comic book superhero world, has some superhero traits, and usually takes on the superhero role in the story of the week or the problem of the week. But usually the problem of the week is not something a comic book would usually, or maybe it would. I mean, you have like robberies and shit, and it's all kinds of petty crime and theft and drug deals going on inside of car washes and shit that I don't remember.
Just what the Hulk was always famous for, petty crime.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. That's the thing. Yes, you can. There are comics where, like, every issue, it's like, oh, there's a fucking guy robbing the convenience store. Somebody stop him. Oh, David Banner gets knocked over and turns into the Hulk. Like, that's it. And, in the comics, it's more like there's a mutant, army of desert creatures, and the Hulk will have to make peace with them in order to survive and keep this truce with the humans that they have going. That's what the Hulk comics were about,
Yeah.
So I think that there is definitely a disconnect there. How do you think that relates to this show? And we'll talk about the pilot in particular, but we're just talking in general about the show at the moment. At the in this day and age, like we're almost 40 years later, and obviously the Hulk has moved on. We have the very popular version of him in the Avengers, and the only reason he hasn't sprung into a far more popular than he's ever been in his own movies, like new franchise, is because of some weird rights issues with Universal. So I think Thor Ragnarok will ultimately be the tipping point with that. But anyway, I ramble too much. So you know what I'm asking you, though, right?
No, not exactly.
How do you think this show holds up now that we're all 10 times more familiar with the comic book version, general public included?
Oh, okay. That's what you're trying to say.
That's what I was getting at when I started rambling about why Hulk should get his own movie again.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to watching, like, 70s Superman. You know what I mean? Or
I
go
disagree.
back even further.
I think 70s Superman is a million times closer to the comics than this is.
Yeah, you're right. I'm backing up even further. Probably more like 50s Superman, although I'll admit I haven't watched a whole lot of 50s Superman.
That's also, I think, 10 times more faithful to the comics than this is. That,
it just reminds
tonally, I will agree with. Yeah, not even tonally. From like a sheer structural standpoint, I will agree with you.
I just feel like it just reminds me of a time when, we've talked about this before with regards to, like, when we've reviewed the older X-Men movies. These kids today live in a world where every comic book they've ever read gets turned into a movie that's somewhat accurate to what they read. Not the case for most of our lives.
Not until I don't know, 10 years ago.
Exactly. So it's just it just takes me back to that time. I'm super used to it. I don't know how a kid today would feel about this show if they were familiar with the Hulk comics. They might look at it with sort of disgust. But me, I mean, I grew up with fucking, like, 89 Batman is super different than the comics. But it's like, I don't know. It's just it's something that I'm used to, so it doesn't bother me at all. So I think it still holds up decently in that regard. But like I said, I don't know how somebody younger who is discovering the show for the first time and maybe more familiar with the Hulk comics than even I was when I was younger. I don't know how they would react to it. You know what I mean? I think it depends on your level of knowledge regarding A, the comics, and B, the state of superheroes on film in movies and television.
Do you think that this still holds up as just a straight up, science fiction drama? Axing all the comic book connections and superhero stuff, because that's very easy to do.
It's a pretty decent, like, monster movie as a show.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that, in particular, for guys like you and me, makes this hold up a lot more better, and we're a lot more willing to accept how different it is from the comic book version. Because it's also like this really interesting monster portrayal of the Hulk, and the whole tone of the thing is way more classic 50s monster movie than it is mixed in with some psychological and emotional elements, than it is like a 60s Batman, just superhero bombastic fest, which you can do both. You can do both with the Hulk, and both are totally valid. But this, at this
Stanley
time, this
originally-
was the smart approach.
Stanley originally conceived of the Hulk as kind of a super powered like cross between Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then over the course of a few issues, really, it morphed into a more traditional superhero type of story. So I mean, it's in the roots of the character anyway. And I feel like this show, due to budgetary limitations and lack of exposure to Marvel Comics in the general public, it just plays that up and sort of pushes the superhero elements into the background, whereas the comics it's sort of reversed. The superhero elements are more often on display, and the horror monster elements are sort of the background to it.
Yeah, well, depending on the story, a lot of Hulk stories that I like in particular will push the monster stuff to the forefront, and the superhero stuff kind of is draped in that aesthetic more so, and I really like that.
Well, that's also something that comes from more modern comic book writing, but especially like back in the day, though.
Yeah, exactly. Like you read, like even when Peter David was doing it, his stuff is this weird. It walks a very fine line between this very effective straight up monster stuff and then, this more typical of the time 80s superhero thing.
Well, a similar thing happened when we reviewed the initial run of Ghost Rider. It starts off as like a horror book because horror books were popular, but then it becomes a superhero story, and it couldn't really decide what it wanted to be. A lot of comics go through that. I mean, it's a strange medium because you're basically making it up week to week, or at least that's the way it went at the time. Very fly by the seat type of writing.
And I mean, Marvel was written in such a bizarre way. That also just it affects the narrative in such a way that can't be ignored.
Exactly.
Pictures first, then the dialogue and the captions. That's madness, but it defined Marvel in such this iconic way that we still can't get away from now. And this casual kind of self-awareness.
Well, and that's one reason that you can point to Marvel books of the time and DC books of the time, and you might be able to say, oh, the writing in this DC run is a little bit stronger, but the Marvel always had like really memorable art for that reason. They kind of put the art
thing.
First.
Yeah, they always had the really dope visual storytelling.
And they also had of course, the more interesting characters as well. Was their other saving grace. They
were more willing to take risks because they weren't like characters who had been around for 30 years. Now that's a problem that's affecting them. Interestingly,
they put a lot more personality into their characters because their characters didn't come around in the 30s, where all comic book heroes basically were the same dude in a different outfit. You know what I mean? Like, everybody was just sort of flat, like, I must stop the bank robber.
and even when DC rebooted their books in the 60s, before Marvel even started to become a thing, with like the Flash and shit, it still had this aesthetic of like everybody was kind of a goody two shoes, even though they had a tragic backstory, and even though they all had been through dark shit. That's what's always been interesting about DC characters, is that they always go through really horrible dark shit, but they always are able to come out of it with a very stalwart attitude. There are some characters in Marvel like that, but the universe is not built around that idea.
Right.
I mean, Captain America will always be the example of that, and Captain America is kind of the.
I don't know here recently.
Well, if you read recent stuff, obviously, and the movie version in particular, sort of best shows that. But you mean like you read like the Ultimate Comics, and he goes through some really emotional like conflicts, but at the end of the day, he's Captain America. He's always like, this is what this is about. The A on my head. and it's always really, it's always a little like sickeningly patriotic, but it's always effective. And that's what's cool about Ultimate Captain America. Anyway.
You look at any given issue of Spider-Man for practically the last 50 some odd years since the character was introduced. It's always as much a soap opera about what's going on in Peter Parker's life as it is a superhero story about fighting Doc Ock. You know what I mean? There's always that extra element of like, I'm fucking depressed and I'm throwing my suit in the trash can. There's always something going on.
Yeah, and the Hulk, to get back to that, it was always never really knew what to do with that. Like, what was the primary crux every week? Yeah, we've got a big monster, but initially they didn't even have a solid grasp on when Bruce Banner turned into the Hulk and why. That changed over time. Initially,
Right. It was just it was like a werewolf thing, right? He transformed every night,
every night, and he had to be locked up. And the Hulk, while not intelligent, was more of just like a bruiser kind of personality. It was more of a straight up Jekyll and Hyde thing. He was also not nearly as strong.
No, well, that's kind of a Superman thing, isn't it? It's he keeps getting stronger.
The Hulk that we all know did not become a thing until he was reintroduced after his main series got canceled, and they were like, all right, Bruce Banner, he's a man on the run, and stress triggers the Hulk transformation, and the Hulk is heroic but simplistic in intelligence. And, always just going after whatever is making him angry. That kind of idea. And that's obviously what the TV show runs with. And I think, again, the archetype that they're doing with their version of Banner here was in the comics long before they did it. But this show definitely sort of defined Hulk, not only for cinematic audiences, but it really said, this is the Hulk, and the comics will always have to go back to this iconic sort of characterization. Man struggling with his inner rage, which unleashes a horrible monster, struggling with his inner demons and everything, while still trying to make the world a better place. Like, that's sort of the idea. And this show, also, goes a long way to make that sort of the version of the Hulk that everybody wants to see. But also, this version of Banner is the other thing that has redefined the character a bit, because he's not this bizarre, like, neurotic sort of down on himself, sort of sad sack. He's definitely depressed, but for a very very good and basic reason. It's not like the comics where we don't find out why he's the way he is until, like, decades into his run, after this show was a thing even. But this show from the get-go goes, all right, this guy's a little moody, but all around he's a good dude and charismatic and out to make the world a better place and trying to maintain his relationships that he values. But
would you say he's closer to an Ed Norton or a Mark Ruffalo?
Mark Ruffalo for sure, by a long shot. Mark Ruffalo's version of Bruce Banner I like so much because he's got like all of the baggage of comic book Bruce Banner, but he acts like David Banner. He's not he's definitely a bit of a sad sack in the Avengers, but very understandably. And again, I think at the end of the day, Mark Ruffalo is more charismatic and more self-confident than and traveling the world trying to make the world a better place, more in line with the show than, say, your comic book Bruce Banner, who's mostly just like going, how am I going to get Betty to marry me even though I tried to squish her? Like, this David Banner's like, I'm running and I'm going to try not to turn green and try to fix that if I can, but I'm running. My life is over until I can fix this. So, let's get into a few more details, shall we? The pilot itself, you liked it, right, D? We've established that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what specifically do you think makes it work? It holds up now. It's still a compelling drama. Aside from all the baggage it carries, is it the performances? Is it Bill Bixby? Is it the writing? Is it just the atmosphere of it? Like, what is it?
Well, it's certainly not the effects.
Yes. Well, okay. For just before you go, I think the scene where he breaks out of the pressure chamber looks really good even now.
That looks pretty decent. The worst scene in the movie, though, And the first time he transforms looks pretty good, but the worst scene in the movie is when he encounters the father and daughter at the lake.
Yes, everything
What is
during that and after that is kind of dodgy. Yeah.
like what is even going on in that scene, and why does it take so long? It's such a long scene. It's so drawn out, and I don't care about any of it. And I'm like, come on, get back to the sciencey exposition.
The science exposition is really good, isn't it?
It's only in the movie so that he can, I keep calling it a movie, but it kind of is. It's only in here so that he can get shot and then go to his girlfriend's house. Like that's all it's in there for. And you could do that so much quicker than what they did.
I would have rathered him stop like a robbery or something, or just stop something more dramatic than, so he scared a girl into a boat. She fell out of the boat out of sheer terror of the Hulk. Then she was drowning. The Hulk was trying to save her with a big tree. And then the father stumbled across this, didn't like what it was about, shot the Hulk. Hulk runs at him, snaps his gun in half, and tosses him into the water. This all takes about 3 minutes or so.
That is one of the first things you have to get used to. Anybody out there who's familiar with comic book Hulk, and maybe you're watching this for the first time.
He's a very different Hulk.
This is possibly... And TV version, different thing going on, budget limitations. I'm not even going to say possibly. This is definitely the weakest version of the Hulk.
Oh, without question.
He got shot in the arm.
Yeah, but it doesn't stop him.
Comic book Hulk, that bullet would have bounced off his skin and hit the guy in the fucking head. Like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
Without question. Well, this Hulk is not a brick wall of muscle. He is a strong mutation.
Exactly. He's Lou Ferrigno, basically. I get the feeling that if he
definitely got a degree of super strength that even if you lift a whole bunch of weights, you would not be able to achieve.
I get the feeling though that like if he got cornered by like a SWAT team and like they were armed to the teeth and they just started unloading like Uzis on him, they could kill him. Like.
I think it would depend on where they shot him. I think it's like a Wolverine thing. Unless you cut off any and all, nervous system activity, I think he'll still heal. They get into it more. There's a bunch of made-for-TV movies they made after the show was done, and it's debatable how canonical they are with the show. They have very different feels to the show, although they all have the same petty crime in them.
These are the ones with bootleg Daredevil and Thor showing up, right?
Well, those are they're a thing, but there's a third one where it's very subtly called The Death of the Incredible Hulk. Guess what happens in that one?
He died.
Damn right. And it's weird, the movie doesn't really build up to it. It's sort of like there's an idea at the beginning where David is like, all right, I've been living with this for a long time. I really need to look into stopping this. And he goes to an old buddy of his, and he's like, hey, help me.
Maybe I should not turn into an enormous green rage monster.
Yeah, maybe it's not a great idea. Maybe it's not good for my wardrobe. And his buddy is like, holy shit, that's insane, bro. And he's just like, I know, right? And he's like, well, can you die? And he's like, I don't think so. I've been through a whole bunch of shit, and I've never died. And here's the bitch of it all. You want to know what actually... And that's the thing. They bring that idea of him dying up early on. It's never brought up again. And then, at the end, he falls out of an airplane, and then he drops onto the ground and dies. And it looks cool-ish, but it's weird. The best effect in the whole thing is when he actually hits the ground. It looks pretty cool. Because they actually show it.
So the way he dies in that TV movie is the way that Ed Norton just went to fight the other guy in his movie.
Well, so two things. One, that helicopter. I don't think that helicopter was as high up as this plane would have been. But in the Ultimates, which is what that movie takes that scene from, they also throw Bruce Banner out of a helicopter, and he's all doped up on shit that was supposed to be keeping the Hulk suppressed, and he still transforms before he even hits the ground. Like in the Ed Norton movie, when he hits the ground, he's still Ed Norton. So presumably he hulked up when he was all injured and shit at the ground, or he hulked up a second before he hit the ground. But in the Ultimates, he just kind of turns in the middle of the air. But anyway, point is, in the TV show, he also falls out of a plane, and it doesn't kill him. Like, again, I don't think it's as high up as it is in the movie, but the TV movie, I mean. But it still doesn't kill him. Anyway, let's get back to the pilot of the show. So it does take a while to get to the Hulk, and as we established, this show does not have much in the way of other comic book elements. It's a drama around all this, particularly this episode, because there's no petty crime to be stopped. Again, usually there's a petty crime that David Banner can get involved with. Not the case here. It's all about his origin. That's the whole thing. And I think that makes it the quintessential Hulk origin. I don't think there's ever been a better Hulk origin story than this movie.
Yeah, well, it's just the benefit of they can't really do anything else with their screen time, so they spend a lot of time really going into the origin and how it works. So
they make it feel
better...
like enough of an event, though, that works. Like the Hulk is interesting because he's sort of his own supervillain. Like, he is a good benevolent soul in a horrible, destructive situation. And in this TV show in particular, the Hulk is portrayed as very benevolent. He's just like sort of this angry primitive who just lashes out at things that make him angry, but he's not a killer. They make that very clear. He's
oh boy,
and he's not and he doesn't hurt women or kids, but he will throw men into water. And he also doesn't throw a punch at anybody ever in the show, in the TV movies, ever. He never throws a punch.
He never smashes.
Well, he smashes plenty of stuff. He just doesn't punch anything.
So yeah, I mean, they spend a lot of time developing the origin, and so it's definitely the most in-depth Hulk origin story ever, I think.
And I just think it's the most effective at outlining the interesting elements of the character and why he's valuable as a character. It shows you that I think that this story is about, yes, the Hulk is this dangerous, bad affliction, but you can still make the world a better place with it, and by progressing forward rather than just receding into yourself and bottling up all your feelings, and that's always sort of the backdrop of the Hulk is it's sort of like, be open about what's bugging you, because otherwise bad shit will go down, and bad shit certainly goes down with David Banner for burying all of his personal grief over the death of his wife, Laura, in a car accident, which he was unable to save her from, and motivating him to experiment on himself with gamma rays and leading to him turning into the Hulk. So that's another thing I really like about this is the origin. It is completely his fault, and he absolutely deserves it. Don't you agree?
In what way?
Well, we talked about this when we were watching it. It's the middle of the night. He's about to leave. He and his lab assistant, not his lab assistant. She's like his partner, like his, I don't know, colleague, I guess is the best word. I don't know what their exact official relationship is. They're hanging out in this lab. I don't know what the fuck they do for a living. I guess they just go, we're gonna make people strong, and somebody's like, cool. I guess that's how that works. So his colleague and he have no idea how to tap into the hidden strength that all humans have, as the intro always says. But then some schlubby lab dude comes over and is like, yo, David, I can't get this transmission you want because there's all kinds of gamma ray activity, bro. I can't do it. And David's like, whatever, I'll come in tomorrow and we'll work something out. Night, bro. So he heads out. He stops halfway. He turns around and he hears like his colleague saying there's some external ingredient missing in the formula of what creates this hidden strength that we've discovered. And he realizes
because the thing is, they discovered that there was like a DNA thing going on where all these people that had these moments of like peak adrenaline and like tapped into their hidden strength, they all had like
lifting up the car.
they all have this similar like DNA mutation going on, and so he immediately thinks, "Oh, that's why I couldn't lift the car when I got in that car accident." But then they check his DNA, and he has it too, and it's like, "Well, what the fuck couldn't I do it?" And then so
Early X Factor in another Marvel cinematic thing. I don't know.
and that's when they determine that there had to be some sort of an external force going on.
I don't know why he suddenly thinks it's gamma rays. That's unexplained. I guess it's just a dawn of the moment. It almost seems like he's like, well, maybe it's gamma rays, because it could be any other kind of radiation. Don't you think?
Yeah, well, the idea is, he's thinking like sunspots, they occur frequently and they tend to fuck with shit. So it's just a thing that occurs to him in the moment. He's like, what if there's a connection there? And he checks,
and he turns out to be dead right. It's a little stupid, but I like the way it's played, because it's all spur of the moment. And the point I was getting to is he doesn't go home that night. He stays there late by himself. He confirms all this with the readings of gamma activity over the past year or so. I think longer than that, like past 10 years maybe. And confirms that all the other people had their moments of strength during high gamma activity, and then he had his moment of strength at a very low, or he didn't get to have his moment of strength at a very low time of gamma activity. So I like that if he had just gone home and thought about it for a while, rather than just in the moment just going, yup, this is it, makes sense, everything has been confirmed for me, I'm going to roll with this and solve the problem. He thinks that he's done the entire scientific method in like an hour, and it goes really bad for him. The visual reference for that, he walks into the radiology lab trying to lift up the gurney, and he can't do it. And then when he walks out, he tries it again, and he can't do it, even though he's been through the Hulk accident at this point. And it just shows this moment of like, he put all this, he took all this risk, he stayed here late, he just, delved into himself to try and solve this thing, and it didn't work out, and then he discovers that it did work out, but in a really bad way, and he turns into the Hulk. I really like that, because it's very Marvel, and more so even than the original Hulk origin is with the bomb. Because yes, Bruce Banner builds the bomb, he's building this thing so that way he can have ultimate peace in the world. That's what he's kind of ultimately building to. He wants to build the ultimate bomb that nobody can replicate, that'll make all the other bombs obsolete. That's sort of his motivation, which is interesting. It's very different from what we have here. Again, Bruce Banner is a different character in the early comics in particular. He's more of a doctor in this version than by a doc. He's a doctor in the original comics too. By doctor, I mean like medical doctor, rather than nuclear physicist. So that's another big distinction that I also think plays into his character as well. There's this disconnect with humanity that he has in the comics that I don't think is represented in the show at all. I think David Banner is a very in-touch human man. Wouldn't you have to agree?
Certainly.
So, I don't know. I like that element of it in particular. In its difference from the comics, but more so in its specific effect of, again, if he had just gone home and talked to Elena about it, his colleague, maybe he wouldn't have ended up being the Hulk.
Yeah, well, it's a perfectly suited origin to this version of the character. Obviously, they couldn't go the whole gamma ray bomb route on their budget.
How do you feel about the experiment scene?
The whole concept of like what they're researching.
I was talking more the specific, in the original comics we have the very iconic G-bomb explosion scene where Bruce Banner gets doused in the gamma rays. In this version, we have him sitting in it.
Yeah, I would argue that him sitting in the chair is just as iconic.
Yeah, you're right. I especially now that that's also the MCU. That iconography is the MCU Banner origin.
Right.
Well, but it's also it's a mix of. It strikes me as a mix of this show and the Ultimate Bruce Banner, where Ultimate Bruce Banner was trying to recreate the super soldier serum that created Captain America. In the MCU, Bruce Banner was tricked into trying to recreate the super soldier serum, thinking he was working on radiation resistance, and ended up turning into the Hulk because he thought gamma rays was the secret.
Right.
Anyway, again, this version is all about just, I'm trying to tap into hidden strength that we can use to save lives. So again, that's also very heroic. That's a heroic motivation to have. So there's subtle hints of the superhero genre thrown in here that I like. But they don't beat you over the head with it, except in the scene where he saves a girl from water with a log. That was pretty. I felt pretty beaten over the head in that moment, didn't you?
Yeah, I feel like they were really trying to pad out their runtime a little bit in that scene because it just goes on way longer than it needs to. It's super slow paced. That whole scene could be recut and edited down substantially, and I think that the whole thing would move at a much better pace in that instance. This is an hour and a half long pilot, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's feature length. Like that's why we're doing this like a movie review, because it's essentially a movie.
Yeah. So I mean, it doesn't need that much of it. That whole scene.
They needed a different kind of action beat, because again, obviously they're struggling to give the Hulk something to do. So they needed to have him come across something more interesting than a girl. I mean, I got the reference. We all got the reference to Frankenstein, the original 1931 movie, but none of us cared though.
No.
So, do something else. Do something cooler. Like, do maybe a more interesting variant on that. What if he had come across like, you can't go too dark, obviously, but do like a kidnapping or some kind of petty crime in that moment would have been effective. I don't know what kind. They're in the middle of the woods, but something. Poaching, maybe?
Poaching. That's a bit.
I don't know.
PSA, you know what I mean?
PSA, I guess. But what if like a mama grizzly bear gets shot and there's like a bunch of cubs and they're gonna like kill the cubs and then he comes in? Like that would have been pretty. That would have worked, right? That also would have been a much more dramatic reason for him to get shot.
I liked the robbery idea better.
Well, who's gonna get robbed in the middle of the fucking woods?
Well, maybe he stumbles upon some criminals that have already committed a robbery, and they're like on the lam, and he winds up getting fucking shot.
Well, but why is the Hulk going to be like, they've committed a robbery, I must beat them up? They've got to be doing something in the moment that's bad, that's going to motivate him to attack them.
I figured it would be more a case of, oh shit, there's a big green guy, I'm going to shoot him, and then he'd be like, oh shit, they just shot me. Hulk smash.
So they just don't. I guess that would work. I agree with just some kind of better dramatic motivation for him to get shot than a father and daughter having a weird like miscommunication with him.
Yeah, and then he could have like beat him up, and then it would have been a scene. Nah.
And I mean, again, they're trying to make this just super like PC. Like they're trying to make this clean for the kids, because this is still a comic book show, even though it's trying to pretend it's not.
And it is still made in 1970, whatever. So
yeah. Oh, I said I was going to check that. I'm gonna check that real quick. So yeah, they're constantly trying to remind you that the Hulk is not going to kill anyone. Nobody's going to get hurt. It's all just good fun, except when it's not. There is an episode of the TV show where David Banner tries to kill himself. He doesn't actually go through with it, but he thinks about it. And it gets dark. It definitely gets dark. But and this movie is definitely a little dark at points. I mean, the nightmare at the beginning, I think, is really effective. Do you think that goes on too long? The up prologue, as I like to call it.
Do I think it goes on too long? No, I didn't feel that way. It seemed all right to me. It is 1978.
Yeah, it is 1978. I also literally just found that. But I also think that is a very effective way of... Laura never has any dialogue. We never hear her speak. But her impact on David's life is really felt there, and that sense of loss that he has throughout the entire movie is definitely effectively evoked without ever seeing them interact in any kind of, like, extended way. We just get little snippets, and we totally get why they worked. It's definitely a little cliched. It's a little sappy. You know, she loved kittens and cried when her brother went off to war or whatever. But, you know, it's still very effective. Sappiness can work.
I just realized that the Ed Norton Incredible Hulk movie came out exactly 30 years after the TV series. It was an anniversary year. I don't know if that was done in...
Well, no, because the MCU was starting, and Marvel was like, we're going to make movies and make lots of money with the Avengers, so Universal was like, yeah, we're in.
Well, then it's a happy coincidence that this movie that has the same exact title as the television series and kind of a similar origin story and even kind of a similar look to the Hulk in terms of, like, proportions and shit. You know, he's not as bulked up as the comic book one in that movie. He's a little bit more...
He's leaner. I'll give you that. He's more human in design.
He's leaner, and he's got a little bit more of that...
he's fucking, like, 9 feet tall, though, so let's not stand on brass taxes.
I think it's a cross between the two, is what I'm saying, because he's got kind of the... I don't know, his hair reminds me of the 70s Hulk. He's got a little bit of longer hair going on.
That's...
Like you said, he's...
Yeah, which is weird because it doesn't look like Ed Norton's hair. Yeah, but that hair I've seen on comic book Hulk. Like, that I've seen that design for the Hulk in the comics. It looks like more of a cross to me between the Ultimate Comics and the classic Hulk. Because Ultimate Hulk is also a little leaner. You know?
Ed Norton goes... You just made another good point. I didn't think of that before. Ed Norton goes from short-haired in his human form to having kind of a little bit more of a mullety thing going on as the Hulk.
That's true.
And who else?
That's very 70s
who else
Hulk.
does that?
Yeah, that's very 70s Hulk. Yeah, that's another thing. That's where the effects don't hold up, is when they do the Bill Bixby in the Hulk makeup. Ooh, that's hideous. Like, what a terrifying, like, ooh.
And then they do that thing where every now and then you'll see his eyes are a different color. Another thing that happened in the 2008 movie.
That's a very effective way to do it, though. I love that, and I love that every version of the Hulk after has adopted that.
But it's weird because when Lou Ferrigno is in the Hulk makeup, he has regular human eyes.
Not always.
Like,
sometimes if they do a really dramatic close up, they'll remember to fucking put the contacts in, but not always.
Yeah, but most of the time he's just running around with Lou Ferrigno's eyes, and you can tell.
Yeah. It's inconsistent. It's about as inconsistent as if Lou Ferrigno is wearing, if he's barefoot with green makeup on his feet, or if he's got, like, these very obvious green slippers on. Or, because they don't want him to run around barefoot and hurt himself because they needed Lou Ferrigno. If they lost Lou Ferrigno or Bill Bixby, they had no show.
I don't know, even plot-wise, the 2008 movie to me kind of feels like a big cinematic version of the TV series.
I totally agree. He's on the run. Although the government element is much more in line with the comics than the show. The show never dips into that, except in, like, one episode where the government mistakenly thinks the Hulk is an alien and then captures him and goes after him, but then doesn't care when they figure out that he's not. Just... So then they're just like, whatever, go away. They don't give a shit. They're like, oh, there's this weird mutant running around.
That movie always struck me as a cross, like a cross-pollination between, like, there's the TV Hulk and here's the comic book Hulk, and you put them together, you get something kind of like this.
Yeah, and there are some elements in the modern comics that I remember sitting in the theater go, ooh, I remember reading that a couple years ago. The whole Mr. Blue, Mr. Green thing in that movie, that comes from, like, the modern comics and shit, you know? Although Mr. Blue turned out to be Doc Samson, I'm pretty sure. Not the leader. I really wish they would have done a 70s leader. That would have been so cool. Like a James Bond, like, Blofeld-esque version of the leader. That would have been amazing.
Well, I wish we could have got a straight up sequel to the 2008 movie and got to see the fucking leader in it. Like they said,
I
I don't know why that.
I would very much so still like to think that might happen. I think there's a better chance we will see the Abomination again.
Sure.
I have a suspicion.
Live at the end of the movie, they did allude to him in an episode of Agents of Shield.
They also, I also don't buy that they have kept him contained so long. Like, he's supposedly stronger than Hulk is. Like, I don't know why they can't contain the Hulk, but they can contain him. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I wish they would have done a 70s version of the Abomination too. They did.
Isn't the idea that his starting strength is stronger than the Hulk, but then Hulk also gets that whole rage boost thing going on, and that's
the idea is that he doesn't get stronger as he gets angrier. He's just a monster because he's a monster all the time. He's like the Thing. He's got one base strength. That's insanely powerful by human standards, but Hulk is a constantly evolving, constantly adapting, evolving to fit the needs of survival type of creature. So that's why he always wins.
That's why they can hold the Abomination and not the Hulk then.
Which it's interesting. I guess that isn't okay. That's an interesting reason. I don't know if any comics have ever made that clear. There was a storyline where the Abomination was in captivity of the government, not Shield. Interestingly, some other shadowy organization who didn't like Shield, and they were telling him that Bruce Banner was fucking his wife, which actually then turned out to be true. It wasn't at that point, but then Bruce Banner coincidentally came to the town where his wife was living, and they ended up fucking, and then it happened, and then they ended up fighting. It was a pretty interesting story, although it was weird that Bruce Banner just coincidentally ended up there. I forget if there was a better reason. It's been so long now.
However, if they do ever bring back the Abomination, I'd like them to have him mutate a little bit more and look more like the comic book. They could do it. I
imagine if he comes back, they'll just have him appear with the new, more traditional design, and just be like, I evolved while I was in captivity.
Yeah, well, they could totally. I mean, that's how Ultimate Destruction played it. Abomination had two forms in that game. There's the regular form that you can run around in when you unlock it as a skin,
which is more like the comics.
And then there's the final boss version of Abomination, who's all like big and monstrous. But he has that version has more of comic book Abomination's face though, because it's more like fishy looking than the other form. It's weird. The other form still has his nose. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, comic book Abomination is a weird character who's changed a lot over the course of the years. My first introduction to him was in the cartoon show, the 90s Hulk cartoon show, and in that. He's just a weird, random genetic experiment by the leader. He's not Emil Blonsky, Russian special forces who, got turned into the Hulk. He didn't get turned into the Hulk. He got turned into the Abomination as a counter experiment to the Hulk. And, that was his whole deal. He was trapped as the monster all the time, and he was stronger than the Hulk, but he didn't get stronger. Hulk did, so.
I also liked that. In the movie, there was an explanation for why the Abomination was different than the Hulk. It was because it was the mixture of the Hulk thing, but with all the other super soldier shit that he had put in his bloodstream.
Yeah, I always wanted to know what that serum was.
Because in the comics, it's always more of just different people turn into different things with gamma exposure. One guy becomes a Hulk, another guy becomes a big fish guy, another guy gets a big brain. There was an idea at one point that gamma radiation would unlock whatever mental subconscious thing you had, but they never did that consistently. Because then they would have a gamma bomb blow up, and everybody in a town would be Hulks. So it wasn't always it wasn't always consistent. It makes sense if you only look at the Hulk and the leader, because here's a really smart guy who gets hit by gamma radiation and turns into a fucking savage.
No, his origin in the comics is not like that, though. He gets exposed. It's more like the movie where he gets exposed to some waste. I'm pretty sure he's a janitor who doesn't have a lot of intelligence.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm getting to.
Oh,
It's like a weird mirror where like Bruce Banner started out as like a super intelligent guy, and then when he mutated, he turned into this big savage like cave monster. And then this other guy's just a fucking janitor. He gets exposed to like gamma waste or whatever, and he becomes like a fucking super genius. So it almost seems in that way like it brings out like what you lack in a way, but then that doesn't make any sense with Abomination because he lacked being a big fish guy, I guess. Like
yeah, that's what he was missing in life. That's what the gamma radiation decided to give him. Oh, that's hysterical. What was I gonna say though? Oh, I've told you what Ultimate Leader is like, right? Because it's interesting how they sort of play with that. Ultimate Leader. Ultimate Leader is an MI6 operative who it has nothing to do with the original leader. That's not Samuel Stearns. He's not a janitor. MI6 operative working for MI6. He's basically James Bond, except James Bond, who's a little older. He has more of a position of authority in MI6, less so a field operative thing. Although he often does go into the field. And then when Nick Fury forms the Ultimates, he go and there's this superhuman arms race that occurs in the early 2000s in the Ultimate Marvel universe. That's when Nick Fury forms the Ultimates. That's when the Fantastic Four starts. That's when the X-Men become a publicly known thing. The European Union tries to start their own superhuman initiative, and one of them happens to be Thor. Although that wasn't even their idea. They just happened to be gifted with the discarded son of Odin, and then they threw him out into the world as their superhuman. But England in particular was like, fuck that. Well, some people were. A lot of people just wanted to use Thor as their Superman or whatever. But one guy was like, fuck that. We need our own superhuman. And this guy is like, I want an MI6 strike team of superhumans. Captain America, but a bunch of them, and they're our Secret Service, the best in the world. We will make sure the world keeps on spinning, and more importantly, that England is at its center. That is what he is about. He is James Bond, and that's what's awesome about him, except he wants to make superhumans. But the MI6 director is like, we should just use Thor. Because he's like, it's less expensive, and it's not worth the risk. But he gets talked into it, and then the MI6 guy who talked him into it is like, well, I guess I'm just gonna experiment on myself. So he gets the scientist who's got like this hacked up mixture of Tony Stark's nanotechnology, which allows him to power the Iron Man suit and allows his brain capacity to extend throughout his entire body, because that's the thing about Ultimate Tony Stark. His entire body is made of neuron cells, so his whole body is basically a big brain. So he's got that, and then he's got the failed super soldier serum that turned Bruce Banner into the Hulk mixed together, trying to be the ultimate human, strength and brains. And he goes through with the experiment, trying to, give Britain its ultimate superhuman, and he's basically just able to give people headaches for a while as a result. And he's confined to a wheelchair as well. That's what's also interesting about Ultimate Leader. He can't walk. His head is so big and his brain capacity is so large that he can't move. They basically explained that like all of the superhuman intellect just got stacked on top of his body that was already there, and it just crushed everything underneath it. It's really interesting. You should we've talked about it before. We're gonna review Ultimate Human. Maybe we won't even have to now because I just went on that rant. I apologize, but let's go back to the pilot then, shall we?
Terrible villain name though, Leader. Gee, I wonder what his goals are.
Yeah, not a great name. What was your favorite Hulk scene in the pilot? Again, I think it's when he tears apart the pressure chamber, because he's not in daylight, he's in a confined space. It doesn't take too long, it's always entertaining, he's always smashing something. And because they don't have to worry about like him killing anybody, they don't have to worry about making him sanitized in PC, he kind of just goes at everything, and it's sort of the most comic book version of the Hulk we see in this show. So
It is a great scene. I think, though, I'm actually going to say that I like his initial transformation scene probably the most.
that scene where he rips apart the car also goes on too long, though. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, conceptually, I like that scene a lot, but that part in particular just goes on too long.
Yeah, they go through way too much trouble to like slow the footage down to make you get the sense of him being like lumbering and kind of slow, which is not comic book Hulk at all.
No, comic book Hulk is scarily fast to the point where people were like, I don't like this because something that big that can move that fast should not be able to exist.
Right. But I just like specifically the transformation itself. It's pretty well done for the time, and there's some moments in it where I'm like, I'm not even 100% sure how they're pulling this off. In 1978, there's some good cutting going on. It's all set during the rain, and there's like thunder and lightning and shit, and it's just a really well done scene. And then he proceeds to smash the car, which another thing that could probably be edited down a little bit. But other than that, I think it's a pretty solid sequence.
Effects wise too, that scene is incredible because in addition to the pressure chamber scene, like you see Lou Ferrigno's ripping through this stuff, and it genuinely looks like he's ripping through metal and iron and shit, and he looks like he's buck naked, like and it looks totally real, and it's very impressive even now. Like you just wonder like how did Lou Ferrigno not just walk off this set like just bleeding from every orifice,
Yeah.
like just after punching metal all day. It's very impressive. But anyway, so yeah, no, I would have to agree that the car scene is good conceptually, but just that the length of it just goes on too long. I don't think the pressure chamber scene goes on too long. If anything, maybe I don't know, all the stuff prior to that's really interesting, though, where they're trying to recreate the conditions of the transformation because they don't know that the trigger is anger yet. Although he's kind of an idiot. Don't you think he would have figured it out? Like thought about, what was going on?
Possibly, but it's not entirely clear how much of the night before he actually remembers.
Well, it's very clear. He says, "I remember everything up until the tire iron, and then I just went out." And then the last thing he remembers is his eyes being white. He never ever remembers what the Hulk does in this show. That's part of the deal. When he wakes up, he's like, because he's always concerned that he killed someone. In one episode, he thinks he does, and he just devolves into just like this like self-spiral of self-hatred, this downward spiral of self-hatred. And in one episode, the Hulk goes crazy and almost does kill somebody, and he also just like is like, me, why is me? But yeah, no, it's interesting and well done. Bill Bixby, how do you feel about him?
I feel fine about him.
You feel fine about him. Is he? He's not your favorite Bruce Banner, or David or Bruce Banner, though, is he?
I mean, I'd have to watch more of the show to really get a good sense.
He really is like the reason to watch it most of the time. He's always good and always likable and charismatic and engaging. It's just everything else around him.
I just realized, I had a hunch about this just now when I looked it up, and I was right. I just realized the guy who played the leader in the 2008 Hulk movie is the fucking guy with the coke habit from Colossal.
Yeah, I knew that.
Anyway.
Didn't we mention that in our review of Colossal? Available?
I don't remember. I just remember seeing him in Colossal.
I'm pretty sure at one point I was like, so the leader has a coke habit.
Oh, okay. I just remember seeing him in Colossal and thinking, that guy looks familiar. What have I seen him in? And then just now when we were talking about the '08 movie, I was seeing him again in my head, and I thought, wait a minute. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I would have to see more of the show to really get a good sense about where Bill Bixby falls. I mean, definitely better than Eric Bana.
Yeah. That's not hard, though. Well, that version of the Hulk is also a lot closer to the, like... Bruce Banner is not really that likable in that movie because he's so emotionally fucked up, which is more in line with, like... He's more like Ultimate Bruce Banner in that movie. like character-wise.
I'm not even on the same train as everybody else right now, where Mark Ruffalo is like the favorite Hulk version, because I've only seen him in Avengers movies. I need to see him do just the Hulk thing on his own to make that determination. You know what I mean?
I feel
So
you.
right now, Edward Norton is sort of the de facto.
Nah, man, I think Ruffalo. It goes Ruffalo, Bixby, and that flip flops depending on my mood. Then it goes Norton. Then Neil McDonough from the animated series and the Ultimate Destruction game.
As I say, I think Ultimate Destruction is my favorite version. Ultimate Destruction is my favorite.
Yeah, that Bruce Banner is also not a pussy. I really like that version of Bruce. He's also a wise ass. I like a wise ass Bruce Banner, because sometimes they give Bruce Banner this like sarcastic, like he really is fed up with everything going badly for him, so he just has this like, well, fuck all this. Like he has like that kind of sarcastic edge to him. I like that version as well, and this version doesn't have that.
That's like one of the best Hulk stories anyway, and it's
Yes,
like original.
I would have to agree. It's
so weird.
Well, it's inspired by a whole bunch of shit, but yes.
Well, of course, it's a hybrid. Everything's a hybrid at this point. But I'm just saying, it's like you know, it's a video game, and it's like one of my favorite Hulk things. Like
it is based largely on the early because one of the writers on the game was a writer from the Hulk comics, and his run is what it's based on.
Like, why isn't that the movie? Like, why didn't they just adapt that game into a movie? You know, you could cut out some of the...
I think something like that is what you do now. Although I also think there's a storyline in the comics where Bruce Banner goes around trying to get rid of all the gamma bombs that exist in the world. Like, there are people who have manufactured them, and he wants to stop them, and he uses the Hulk as a weapon to do so. It's cool. Mm-hmm. I want that movie, except it's not gamma bombs. It's, you know, some other variant on that. Maybe whatever he did, his experiments are recreated to create monsters or whatever, and he has to put an end to them and using the Hulk.
I want a Hulk story with... I want a Hulk movie with Maestro in it. No, I want...
I really want a bunch of scenes where he punches weird-looking monsters in the face. That's the Hulk movie I've been waiting to see since my childhood.
What I really want, and what I really think... The Ang Lee movie, if they had done this, it would have been like instantly a letter grade better than it already was, because they were already doing all the psychological shit with him, and there were moments in the movie where you didn't know if he was dreaming. Somebody do the fucking Devil Hulk. That's one of my favorite ideas in all of Hulkdom, and it needs to be done.
I think you can sort of mix elements of Devil Hulk. No, I guess you do him as his own thing. I want to see Joe Fixit before I want to see Devil Hulk.
That's like a whole different movie. That's like barely even a Hulk movie at that point. That's like a gray Hulk hanging out in like Vegas doing shit.
Yeah, but that's such a small part of the comics, though. Well, that's not a small part. There's a run there, but he's the Gray Hulk before that. They need to do the whole smarter but dickisher Hulk, you know? Because Green Hulk is angry and primitive, but he likes to save puppies and shit. And if he's left alone, he largely protects the innocent and goes after people who fuck with him. Like that's what he's about. Joe Fixit is like, that girl's hot. I'm gonna pursue her and destroy everything in my way.
I'd love to see a Savage Banner on screen. That'd be fun.
I always thought it would be interesting if like Hulk and Banner swapped minds, where it's like the Hulk's brain is in Banner's body and Banner has Hulk's body. To see if...
Well, that's kind of the idea with Savage Banner, isn't it? You could do that as a movie and just have Savage Banner and Professor Hulk.
I don't know if that's not a movie. That's a comedy sketch, if anything. I don't know if there's a movie there.
It's a subplot to a movie. It's a thing he has to work out in order to...
I've always wanted... I think you kill a bunch of stones kill a bunch of birds. Kill a bunch of stones with one stone. That's what I was gonna say. Kill a bunch of birds with one stone, and do the Banner and Hulk separation, the Gray Hulk, the leader, and a whole bunch of other monsters and shit that are results of his experiments done in one movie. I think that's your solo Hulk movie post all the Avengers stuff. You sound overwhelmed.
Oh, sorry, I got distracted.
My bad.
I mean, we just need more Hulk movies.
I agree. But I think that this pilot is the best of them. What do you think of the supporting cast? Like all the people around David Banner, though, are they compelling enough for you?
Yeah, I like what's her face.
Elena.
And I mean, most of the movie is just him and her. So if you like those two, then you're pretty set.
Yeah, it's well. Oh well, we have to talk about Jack McGee, don't we? The only other recurring character for almost every episode of the show. He sometimes doesn't appear, but he's usually around, constantly pursuing the Hulk. What do you think of him?
He seemed alright.
He's obviously
He's
not
good.
likable. He's obviously a complete asshole.
I mean, from what you've told me, I know he's a big deal in the show proper, but he's such a nothing role in this movie. Like he doesn't really do anything.
Well, he mostly. Well, he sort of kills Elena at the end.
No way.
In a way, I mean, he knocks over a thing, he runs out, it blows up, and then it kills her. And the only reason he doesn't kill David is because he's the Hulk.
Yeah, but that's always happening. There's not a whole lot you can do about that.
There's always people knocking over explosives and indirectly killing people, and it's totally fine.
Hey, occupational hazard when you're a scientist.
But did you think that he was just like kind of wasted setup as opposed to a real, like, oh, this is a guy that I like watching who has a reason to be on screen? Did it mostly strike you as just like, oh, we need a dickish reporter who's going to follow the Hulk around?
I mean, it depends on what lens you're viewing this through. If you're looking at it as the pilot to a TV series, then of course there's setup. But if you're looking at it as like sort of a standalone like thing, like, you know, we've kind of been talking about it as if it was a straight up movie, then yeah, it's kind of, oh, what's he here for? You know?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's certainly a concern. And ending wise, too, I think it's problematic in that way because this could totally be the end, and you would never need something after this. You know, like this is it's its own self-contained story. Like you don't need setup for like, oh, and then he's gonna get chased by a reporter. I do have to agree that he's sort of a non-entity. The only purpose he serves is to give the negative viewpoint on the Hulk that for some reason, like he's the J. Jonah Jameson of the series, you know, like he's J. Jonah Jameson except he would follow Spider-Man around, you know,
Yeah.
Constantly trying to prove to everybody that he's bad news and that he exists even.
He'd be getting his own damn pictures of Spider-Man.
Yeah, and he never gets a solid picture of the Hulk, I don't think. Or if he does, it's not a good one. And he never figures out David Banner is the Hulk, I don't think. Pretty sure. He figures out that the Hulk is a guy who turns back and forth.
How did they figure that out?
It's really complicated and it's kind of stupid, but it's a good episode, so we're going to talk about it at some point.
Does he find out that David is not, you know, dead?
No, that's another stupid episode where they play with that. No, he never figures out that David is not dead. That's sort of the annoying thing. And it's for 5 seasons, you desperately want it to happen. And almost every episode there's a moment where you think it's going to happen. But no.
I can't conceive of why, as a writer, you wouldn't do that. I mean, that's like such a great thing to dangle over the audience's heads, you know? And to never bring it to fruition is like, ugh.
Yeah, well, maybe they intended to. The show was canceled. It didn't end. It was canceled. So I don't know. They never...
This also comes, though, from an era of television where it was much more about keeping things status quo than...
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you have him reveal that he's the Hulk, what then? He's going to tell everybody that David Banner is alive.
Exactly.
Although that would have also been interesting. I would have liked to have seen that. Again, in a modern TV show, you do that.
Yeah, it's almost like they didn't realize, hey, this whole fugitive with the Hulk premise is only going to last us so long. We better start setting up some other status quo changes. Nope.
Mm-hmm. What else was I going to say, though? But, you know, the show has a lot of really standout episodes that we will talk about. There's a lot of crap we're not going to talk about. Some of the crap we might discuss out of fun. We might do, like, I think we might do a special where, like, we're going to talk about some bad episodes of the Hulk.
Actually, it's weird because The Fugitive itself actually did have a conclusion, but all these shows that were copying off The Fugitive, like The Incredible Hulk or the Planet of the Apes series, never got to have a conclusion. Of course, the Planet of the Apes series was super short-lived anyway. But it's just funny that The Fugitive actually did wrap up its story, and all the ones that copied it never never got either because they were
Well,
too
this
short-lived.
show eventually got to it with a obviously titled TV movie.
That's true. That's true. So they had the two with not Daredevil and not Thor, setups for other shows, I imagine, and then they did the death of the Incredible Hulk, right? So is that how that went?
Those are the three, yeah. They planned to do a fourth one, actually, but then that's when Bill Bixby died, so they didn't do it.
No, I didn't know Bill Bixby died.
You didn't know he was still alive?
I mean, he could have been. This was only the 70s. Come on, man.
But I always assumed that the death of Bill Bixby was like a pretty famous Hollywood going on. Like that was very like, oh shit, Bill Bixby's dead. My God.
No.
I know it didn't happen while we were alive. I don't think anyway. But at the same time, I'm saying, it's weird that you didn't know that he was dead.
I don't even know if that was like a big deal at the time, Bill.
It was a big deal. Yeah, it was.
I feel like that was like one of those things, like a celebrity dies and you hear about it like on the news and you're like, oh, that's weird, and then you go back about your day.
Well, yeah, that's what every celebrity death is. I'm saying it was that though. I mean, it wasn't like a Michael Jackson thing, but it was like he's dead. Wow.
Yeah, and then people would, and then I always do this when celebrities die. I forget they're dead until I watch the Oscars the next year, and they do the like in memoriam thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, that guy died.
Well, he also had a very public battle with cancer. That was part of the deal as well. So
cancer of the.
It wasn't just that he died. Anyway.
What if they had killed him with cancer in the show? That would have been spooky perfect.
That would have been 10 times more interesting than throwing him out of a fucking airplane. It would have been morbid, but it would have been interesting.
And it makes perfect sense plot wise. So
yeah, well, there are versions of the Hulk that have done that. Betty Ross had cancer at one point from being around the Hulk too much. In the Jason Aaron run of the Hulk, Bruce Banner is separated from the Hulk once again. Hulk fucks off. He's intelligent at that point. He wants nothing to do with Banner. And Bruce Banner gets cancer somehow and decides that the only way to fix it is to get the Hulk back, and decides to go about doing that. And at one point plans to have a second gamma bomb explosion to try and recreate the Hulk. It's really interesting. We might have to talk about that series at one point too.
I gotta say though, Bruce Banner / Hulk. I'm getting real tired of the on again, off again shit. Either split up or don't.
Yeah. Good point. I'm sick of all this Hollywood romance bullshit. Anyway.
Fucking Sam and Diane up in this bitch.
So why don't we wrap it up then, D? So the Incredible Hulk 70 pilot. Do you recommend it to people now?
If they like this sort of thing.
What is this sort of thing? Superhero movies?
A late 70s made for television version of a superhero. Yeah, that's
well, that's very specific. It's a very specific niche. I would have to agree that this is certainly the cream of that crop, but I think it's a solid monster movie too.
Yeah, you can watch it for that reason. If you're somebody who's, hasn't seen it, maybe you've heard of it but haven't actually ever seen it, but you are sort of familiar with the comic books, and maybe you belong to that age group earlier that I was saying I didn't know how I would react to it. Maybe give it a watch because I'm super curious.
Yeah.
To know how somebody with coming at it from that perspective would view it. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, again, the differences are so unimportant, like to what the show is trying to be about, that I hope that what the show is getting at is maintained, but I don't know. I guess that we will have to see if any of our listeners have never seen the show and they're more familiar with the traditional Hulk from the comics and the movies, what they think of it. So I think though that it's better than Ghostbusters 2. So just throwing that out there. And the show overall is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, despite having some long stretches of garbage episodes. Season 3 is kind of a giant waste of time. But, in particular. But, and 5.
There was kind of an interest in the 70s for, like, superhero-y stories on television. I mean, you had shit like, $6 Million Man, not based on a comic book or anything, but it is basically like a superhero / secret agent type story.
Following the Superman movie, of course, yeah. And Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
You had there was a 70s Doctor Strange pilot. I don't know how many people are aware of that. That was...
Yeah, apparently that's garbage.
That was something.
Yeah.
This would have been the same rough period of time as the Wonder Woman show, too, wouldn't it have?
Yeah, no, this was very close, yeah. There was a Spider-Man show on at this time. Well, that didn't last long at all, and that was like an absolute disaster.
Paled in comparison to the Japanese version.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. The Japanese version was also around the same time and a million times better.
It may be the best version of Spider-Man.
I can't disagree with you. Anyway.
I'm just going to say none of the other ones ever had a giant robot. I don't know if that matters to most people, but it's a big point in favor from where I'm sitting.
Well, the Rhino in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is kind of a giant robot.
Yeah, he's not really giant in that. He's more giant in Ultimate Spider-Man the video game than he is in that.
Well, yeah, in the Ultimate Universe, that's a big robot suit anyway, so, yeah.
Did you ever play Ultimate Spider-Man the game?
Yes, and I read the Ultimate comics, so I'm very, very familiar with Ultimate Spider-Man as an idea. He was a very whiny version of Peter Parker, but he had cool hair. Anyway.
Cool version of Venom, though.
Oh, beastly version of Venom. Anyway.
The shit they did with Carnage later on got a little confusing, but that Venom was dope.
Well, that was just weird what they did with Carnage. The Hobgoblin was also cool in the Ultimate Universe. I like that a lot. So, anyway. Next week, Dylan, what are we doing?
Shit, I don't know. What are we doing?
Oh, it was you started this. It's a book that you read that I'm going to read.
Oh, shit. Well, I didn't know if we were going to do that next week because that depends on if you have it finished in time.
Well, let's set the goal, and if I don't do it, we'll do something else. But let's set the goal, and we will try to achieve it. It's only 400 pages. I think I can manage.
All right, fine. There is a recent book. Of course, we recently reviewed the original Pierre Boulle Planet of the Apes novel. But coming out just this year, there was a book called Planet of the Apes: Tales from the Forbidden Zone, which is an anthology of tales set all throughout the original movie timeline, and also some of them are set in the TV universe. Some of them are even what-ifs that don't really fit in any of that, but it's all like based on classic apes. Nothing pre-2001, but it's just a bunch of stories set in that sort of wheelhouse, and it's pretty good shit. Have you actually started on it yet, Bill, or is it just?
I started the first story. I didn't get very far in, but I did start the first story, and I'm certainly engaged, but the problem is I've been reading comic books by less than legal means lately at such a rate that I think it's affecting my psyche. So I have to put that aside for a few days and commit myself to this. I'm going to actually jump right back into it after we get off the call tonight. So I will do my level best to have it finished by this coming Thursday.
Do me a favor, Bill, as you're reading. Kind of go through for each story and just kind of make a note about roughly what each one is about, just because it's been a while since I've read it now and I've started reading something else. So if you can remind me what each story was about, then I should be able to be like, oh yeah, that was the one where such and such happened and blah blah blah.
Well, we'll go through it, but when we get there. So anyway, this is stuff we should be talking about off recording. So until next week, I'm Bill Worster, aka Zazubaar.
And I'm Super DM64.
Reminding you that you can't see us because you don't deserve it, because this is a podcast, Colonel Hogan!